Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I have the endgame update for my Fire Cast on Crit build, and we have made some pretty big changes overall. So let's get to the headline. Is it the most OP thing ever? Well, it's got some pretty damn good mapping and also clear, and it's got some pretty insane single target damage. However, here is the issue, the survivability. We have got some plans and some recommendations on how to tank up, and overall you can get pretty beefy. In the background here, I had to respec a bunch of my life and also take my belt off to show what the build looks like without Headhunter. But overall, you will probably have about 5 to 6k life when you have all of your points filled in and everything is said and done, and you have reasonable gear. So, you know, that's pretty good. You'll end up with about 8k EHP in terms of just raw life pool, combining life and energy shield. And you will also be able to regenerate both at the same time on Consecrated Ground, because I did swap from an Assassin over to an Inquisitor. So the reason I did this is that while the Assassin offers a ton of damage, it actually doesn't really offer much else. And what we're lacking right now is not damage, it's not clear, it's actually just raw life and survivability. So the Inquisitor offers, you know, it does offer a pretty damn good amount of damage, but it also does offer ailment immunity, which is an incredible amount of quality of life on, you know, tons of different boss fights and also in mapping. And it allows you to be much more flexible with your gear and also your flasks, and overall, it's a pretty damn good time. So we did go with the Inquisitor. You do also get that double regen on your energy shield and your life, especially when you're going for, you know, a little bit of a hybrid approach. And you will notice in the next video, we do have a pretty decent amount of energy shield. It's almost 2,000. And I'll chuck that video on now. We have a Minotaur kill, a Delirious Minotaur kill, which I'll show off to you guys, and we'll play the footage for. Roll the tape. All right, let's jump in here. All right, so here we go. Delirious Minotaur. Alright, so overall we are an Inquisitor, and I also did decide to knock off a few items which were fairly expensive. So the budget, the build is actually far more budget now. Of course, you can play it without the Headhunter, which does put it well and truly in range of the around about 20 Exalt budget, maybe a little bit less if you get a few bargains. And it can do most of the content in the game when you get a little bit more life. So you can see here we've got about 5k in the background there, or 5 or 6k EHP. You can well and truly go up to 8k, no problem, and that will solve a lot of the build's issues. But let's move forward on the build overall. So I'd probably rate it about a 7 out of 10 for the mapping, and I'd probably rate it about a 6 out of 10. We got some FPS issues there. 6 out of 10 for the bossing. And the reason I give it such a low mark for bossing is because you cannot stack any of the truly overpowered mechanics in Path of Exile on this build. So you can't get Overleech, you can't go Mind Over Matter with the crazy agnostic shenanigans, you can't go Block unless you try and really change the build a lot, and you cannot go Dodge. Those are the main massive juicy mechanics which you really use to basically become almost immortal in this game, and you do not really have access to any of them. So when you get hit for 10k, you better have 10k life, because otherwise you're in deep trouble. And that's kind of the issue which I had with the build overall. When you compare it to other very similar builds and playstyles, for example, you know, like a Slayer Cyclone build, which have all these free endurance charges, you know, they have a ton more life, they have Overleech. I just couldn't justify investing any more in this build when there was just infinitely better options out there which play very similarly and have a similar amount of damage but with infinite more quality of life and also defense. So overall, that's why the build will be stopping here. But as you can see, it is performing pretty well for the small amount that I've invested in its gear. And I'll go over that in game in just a second here. So overall, if you're thinking about picking up this build, just be aware that it is melee. It is a melee build. So if you haven't played melee, you do have to approach bosses very differently as a melee character. So for example, on Cyrus, you're going to have a much harder time in the last phase because you have to get on top of him and not just dodge the die beam. You have to actually be on top of him to do damage. Obviously, when you get on top of him, you're going to do an immense amount of damage, but to get on top of him is actually quite difficult. Similarly, in Shaper, you have to basically wait until he does the beam. So anyone who's thinking about doing this build, make sure you keep in mind that it is melee, and it is a melee build without any of the overpowered defensive mechanics. Disclaimer over. So the build let's talk a little bit about where you could take it and overall what it's doing in the background here. So of course I gave it a pretty high rating for mapping. This is a very, very good Harbinger mapping farm. It's very, very good Delirium Orb mapper. It feels super duper fun and super duper safe to do Deli on. Super duper awesome to do, for example, Legion on even. You can take it into New Vistira and you're going to have no issues with it at all. You can obviously slap on those Athnaths again, and it's going to be super duper awesome for you. So overall, I'd rank it a fairly good mapper. And if you're looking for a mapper, which, you know, just kind of takes it easy and can get a lot of EHP, this could be a pretty damn good pick for you. And I really, really did enjoy mapping with it overall. Definitely one of the more fun builds I've played in maps. Right up there with TS, actually, like, to be honest with you. When it comes to the bossing though, as you can see there, I do get chunked quite hard, but the damage more than makes up for it in a lot of cases. It's only when you cannot destroy the boss, like in one flask combo, like you can do there, that you're going to have some issues. So, you know, bosses like Chimera are going to be annoying for you. You know, bosses like Cyrus, if he teleports around in the last phase, are going to be kind of annoying for you. But overall, you know, Shaper, you'll delete him. You know, all the other Guardians, you'll delete them. Pretty much any map boss in the game, you'll delete those too. It's just when you get to the phase bosses where they can kind of really, like, you know, move you around and mess you around that you will have those issues. So overall, I kind of want to jump in game now and show you guys kind of where the build is and where I would take the build in future if I wanted to continue to invest in it long term. So overall, biggest changes were that we did drop Athnaths, as I mentioned, and we are now an Inquisitor. So as I mentioned, Inquisitor does get ailment immunity, as well as amping up your regeneration while you're on consecrated ground. So you do get consecrated ground whenever you're stationary, and when you move, you have that consecrated ground linger on you for an amount of time as well, which is quite nice, which is essentially permanent ailment immunity. You make up for the crit that you lose from going Assassin to Inquisitor with Righteous Providence. It actually ends up being a little bit more consistent in my opinion, overall. Because you have it from the very start, you don't have to build up power charges, which I'm a big fan of. And you do in fact get Instruments of Virtue, which gives you Battle Mage. So Battle Mage essentially adds any weapon damage on your weapon to your spells. So this heavily juices up your Blade Blast and Blade Fall and gives it a ton of extra juice, which is really nice. Then I'm a big fan of Battle Mage. So you overall don't really lose too much damage. You gain a little bit more consistency, and you do get some more tankiness, which is super duper awesome in my opinion. So pretty nice there. Overall though, I would actually trade quite a bit of my tree over for more additional life. As you saw in the video, we have about 6k EHP right now. I would actually trade a significant portion of my damage right now to spec it into Marauder and Scion in terms of life. That's where I would go with this build, and that's where I think you would need to take it to make it feel really good on, you know, overall and never die. That's where I would kind of go in that direction. The reason this is so powerful is because you're using a Corrupted Soul Glorious Vanity, which essentially gives you this keystone here, which gives you a portion of your life as energy shield. In addition to that, you can obviously get a ton more life on your gear, but you can also craft the modifier, which gives you 10% of your life as extra energy shield from the bench. So it gives you 25% of your life as extra energy shield, and that's actually really, really strong because you regenerate that normal life and energy shield at the same time as an Inquisitor while you're on consecrated ground, which is pretty damn awesome. All right, a few different directions you guys could go in here if you're interested. You can also go low life as this build and use the new aura, which basically gives you mitigation when you're on low life. You can swap this jewel out here and swap it over to somewhere else, and you can take Pain Attunement. That'll give you more damage, meaning you can take away damage in other areas and go over and put that in more defense, which can be quite nice. That'll also give you Overleech, which can help you sustain a bit on some fights, like, you know, sometimes you need that Overleech. And then you can also look into going for obviously the life I mentioned. But you can also look into going for a completely different setup using Purifying Flame. So the reason you would go Purifying Flame is so that you could actually drop the Cauterizer. I'm well aware this is a completely different setup, but if you go Purifying Flame instead, you can still get a ton of damage. It will be less damage, but you can still get a lot, and that will open up your options in terms of your weapon slot. So when you open up those options, you can now go for a one-hander and a shield, meaning you can go for block and spell block, which could be quite good with glancing blows and really tank up that way. Or you could indeed use a staff, and staff nodes, as a lot of people know, are the most powerful on the tree right now. You can get a ton of endurance charges for free with a staff, you can get a ton of damage, and you can also get a ton of crit and crit multi and overall accuracy, which means that you could in fact drop the Ephagon later on. So obviously this is all fairly advanced stuff and it's untested, but these are the different areas and directions you could go in and push your build towards. There is a few other directions you could go in. So overall, if you wanted to tank up a different way, you could indeed go for physical taken as elemental. And what this essentially will do is like basically help you mitigate all of those big physical hits, which is where a big issue lies with this build. You don't really have any true physical mitigation outside of your fortify. So you can indeed pick up a big chunk of physical mitigation by having like 18%, I believe it is, on your chest piece, physical to elemental, and you can also get an additional, I think it's 10 on your helmet, so it's 28% physical taken as elemental, which then is mitigated by your defenses here, your resistances. On top of that, you can also get fortify effect crafted on your helmet if you had a better helmet than me, but as you can see here, my helmet is pretty trash. In the aura department, if you did want to drop this modifier on this chest here, this nearby enemies are blinded, you can take flesh and stone instead and still combo that with the Ephagon, and that will also take a massive big chunk of the budget out because you don't need to have this very specific modifier on this chest piece. You will have to drop a little bit of the damage rolls, so you could drop, for example, Aspect of Spider and Purity, and then use flesh and stone to blind the enemies around you, and that will give you that 100% chance to hit, which is also a pretty good option if you wanted to go down that route. And then you can use pretty much any chest piece you want. You could use like a lightning coil. You could use just a massive chunky chest piece with like, 20% increased life and massive amount of flat life, and also ton of armor. That could be pretty good there. Basically, the sky's the limit in terms of the actual options here. There is tons of things that you could go and do with this build, and it is actually a pretty flexible base, and I fully expect someone to make it a super duper awesome build. But overall, I was more excited about going for a Slayer Cyclone direction, and I think I'm going to pursue that at some point in the future, because I really do like the idea of free endurance charges. Endurance charges are just insane, and you get free endurance charges. That just really does get me hyped. But overall, I would definitely say this is a fairly solid build, as long as you're used to playing melee and you do go in one of the tanky directions that I described, either by picking up life, going for a different weapon and purifying flame, or going with the elemental conversion kind of path and also really tanking up. If you do all that, you've got a pretty good boss on your hands. You will, of course, need to make sure you manage the mechanics quite nicely. But overall, in terms of expensive items, the only real expensive items on this build will be the Circle of Anguishes, as well as the Awakened Spell Cascade. If you want to use it, you can obviously drop that and go for a few less blades. But those are the core expensive items. You do not need Headhunter, you do not need Bottled Faith, and you can also drop the Watcher's Eye I'm using by going for Synthesized Fire Conversion Gloves. You can get 50% conversion on them, and then you can also, in addition to that, drop Magmatic Strikes and Anoint Life or something else instead. You could anoint Constitution, for example. And then overall, that's pretty much all the expensive items out. You can use Flesh and Stone instead of the Blind on the chest piece, and you can use any 6 length you like. And overall, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of get this build up and running. Overall, pretty good Guardian Farmer as long as you get it a bit tanky, and I think it's a pretty interesting build, and it's a bit of fun if you want to play around with something. Overall though, I do think that there is better options, and if I would recommend this, I think I would just say go play a Slayer instead. So overall, hope you guys have enjoyed this short build series. If you like build-based videos, make sure to like and subscribe, and if you've got any other builds you want me to check out, make sure you comment them down below. So all that said guys, hope you guys have enjoyed. See you guys in the next one. Cheers.